This is Paul Nobles from eatperform.com. I am sitting here apparently with my Bosu ball in the background. That's that's from days past, man.
It looks
Using
it looks
to
like all the
establish,
air is filled in
yeah,
it.
to establish my core. Now Maggie's kids, when she comes in to do some work, her kids play on it. So yeah. We actually have two. There's another one over there. Um, April, if you want to say hi, Spencer, you want to let everybody know you're here.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, what's going on, everyone?
So Spencer took his level one course this week. A little bit out of curiosity for him. Spencer currently, well, Spencer's a doctor, obviously. He's a general practitioner. Is that the best way to say that?
Well, family physician, general practitioner is kind of like that's the old school where they just did, after medical school, they did a year internship and then went on their own. I do a family medicine residency, plus I'll be doing some more specializations in like bariatric medicine and cholesterol medicine, which is called lipidology. But yeah, family medicine.
Yeah, I think the whole bariatric thing is kind of interesting. I've known a few people. That's obviously the stomach shrinking thing.
Well, that's bariatric surgery.
Yeah.
That's where they go in and they
Oh,
either realign your pipes and cut out some stuff in your stomach,
what's
or
the difference?
so what I would do is I focus more on the diet part and lifestyle factors. Plus, I can do some medicines to help and look at it from a medical standpoint as opposed to just going in and cutting.
Yeah. Yeah, the it's kind of interesting that the success rate that on that isn't, as high as you would think, because many of the doctors don't tend to focus on the lifestyle aspect of things, and so they end up, doing this surgery, and then kind of the mental holes aren't filled, and ultimately the people end up with some bad habits as a
Yep.
result, and then sometimes do the surgery more than once, which is crazy, I think. Um, so why don't you give a little bit of your perspective? I know you kind of posted something about the zone. I think people will find that kind of interesting. But what was your experience with the criticism, just as a background for people? People say, well, um, you know, you could take the level one course and then you can become an affiliate, which of course assumes that all of these people have no prior training whatsoever, which usually isn't the case, but that tends to not be brought up by most of our critics. Spencer's reasoning, though, was just more out of curiosity, and so I'd be interested to get your opinion on the coaches that teach it
hmm
and their level of experience and how their communication came across to you.
Yeah, so it was interesting. So I didn't tell anybody that I was a physician in there. Everybody just assumed I wanted to be a trainer. Being an ex former Division One athlete, it looks like I fit in with a bunch of the other kind of athletic looking trainers or wanting to be trainers. So the first thing that I noticed was that the people teaching the course, they were all very fit and appearing and very energetic, charismatic, had a lot of brought a lot of energy in while they were speaking, and I could tell that they were picked for a reason, allowing for getting these people excited about CrossFit in general. That was the
Do you remember who the coaches' names were?
Nicole Gordon, and she's part owner of the local box that I'm at over in Yorktown, Virginia. But she was the kind of the head one. Then there was a guy named Donovan uh, Wilkinson, some Sarah Wilkinson maybe, some
Okay,
other.
I think she did mine. What a lot of people don't realize is that the main person, I took one in Chicago, and then I had to retake the test because, as I mentioned to Spencer, um, I failed the test the first time. I'll give you a little history on my level one because it's actually a pretty funny story. Um, but Chuck, who is actually one of the main trainers now, and is just a fantastic. He's actually the head. He was the head person at the Northeast region for judges this weekend. But one of the reasons why you didn't get the normal treatment, normally, like I said, the second one that I took here in St. Paul, Chris Spieler was the level 1 person, and so it's very common to come in and like Rich Froning or Jason Kalipo or one of these guys ends up being one of the coaches, which is kind of cool.
Oh, that is kind of cool.
Yeah,
No.
that's very, very common, but obviously right now many of them are competing.
Yeah. But the other thing is like you said, the big criticism is the form and the people on YouTube that are doing crazy things, getting injured type of stuff. So that's kind of the criticism from a lot of other fitness professionals. So I was just kind of feeling it out. But I tell you what, these trainers, the people that are teaching the course, were very good at their technique, and I've been lifting forever, in college and everything like that, and they were able to give me a lot of good pointers and help me with my form, and I'd feel comfortable sending. The whole reason I went is I want to feel comfortable sending my patients to CrossFit boxes, and I'd feel comfortable as long as I visited the box and make sure that the trainers at these boxes were good. So it was a good experience for me.
Yeah, I wrote an article, and it was talking a little bit about CrossFit for competition compared to CrossFitting for wadding. And one of the things that I brought up was, because I went to powerlifting because some of my movements weren't great. And so the one big thing that I took away, because, I CrossFitted pretty heavily for a couple years, and now, coming back, the main thing that I learned was, if I can't do it slow, don't do it fast, and I can't tell you how big of a change that has made for me, because all the little nagging injuries that you get that build up over time, because it really is sort of hard. I think most people that CrossFit realize this. It's very hard to heal because you're always doing similar type movements, and so you're better off. Like for instance, I use the example in the article that toes to bar were tricky for me, overhead squats were tricky for me, and one other thing. But so I still work on all these things. I still take time to work on these skills, but in general, I don't do them in WODs because I just end up getting hurt, and that's really not. It's kind of not the responsibility of the trainer. Certainly, there should be some type of warning, and there often is. But the people, I know for myself, I was kind of trying to push myself to get better, and I only knew harder, right? And I wasn't always looking at smarter. And when I went to powerlifting, I started realizing that smarter was a lot better than harder. And now that I've come back, I really haven't had any significant injuries at all, But, I don't do super long WODs or things of this nature. Chris Spieler actually was like I said, the coach in my second one, and he said something that I thought was phenomenal, and I've mentioned it many, many times, that if you're a CrossFit coach, right, the 70-year-old woman, her modifications should be similar to the male WOD killer, right? So if the male WOD killer finishes in 9 minutes 56 seconds and it takes that 70-year-old 30 minutes, that's on the coach, right? Because the coach should not be allowing that athlete, they're just doing two different workouts.
Yeah.
And I've always, I agreed with that. I thought that was a cool idea, but I never really embraced it the way that I have since coming back. And in general, my goals and my focus have just been a lot better. So you did talk a little bit about the zone. on your feed, and that brought up some interesting points. I do agree with you, by the way. I often hear people say, well, I do the zone, but I add fat, more fat than is recommended for the zone. And I was like, well, so okay, you don't do the zone then, you know.
Yeah, right.
And that's a criticism. That's a criticism of paleo, right? People say, well, I do paleo, but I just add in strategic starches.
Right.
Well, you know, you're really not doing paleo, you
Right.
know. And I hear people say often, you know, well, you know, paleo is not low carb um, because you just have to eat a lot more veggies.
Right.
Fibrous veggies is low carb because
Right.
when you net it out, ultimately you're really not eating a lot of usable carbs for your muscle. And what happens for a lot of people is they see a good result from that in the beginning, but their body kind of holds on to fat as a result. Oftentimes people eat more fat than they kind of realize. You know, they sort of get used to it. I mean, I can't tell you how many people this weekend at the Northeast region were telling me about bulletproof coffee and this and that.
Oh God.
Wow, you know, I mean, you know, bringing into your diet, you know, 400 calories just right off the bat. I mean, if you can fit it in, you know, I guess there's an argument for that, but
Right.
in general, I'd just rather food. What are your thoughts on some of that, but specifically the zone because that's what they teach in the level one.
Well, it was just first of all, it's like nobody's talked about the zone since the 90s, I feel like. I mean, I met Barry Sears at one of these bariatric conferences because he sells his products at these things. I got my picture taken with him because it was just funny. But
Yeah.
now that we have, you know, calculators, macro calculators, and computers and stuff that track all our calories and all this stuff for us, the whole block system is so silly. It was confusing. It was kind of like this is so it doesn't even follow the science anyway, and the data that we have now. So it's like, why are we doing something that's like 20? I guess at this point, you know, 20 years old. I don't
Yeah.
know. It was just kind of like we have such better stuff, and it just is very silly, out of place.
Yeah, I think in the case of Glassman, he got used to it, and so it's something that he can follow, and it either kind of works for him or doesn't. You know, I don't really know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in general, you're right. I mean, the tools that are more accessible to us these days are really just a better and the argument, you know, for them is that you know paleo kind of gets you there, but then when you have some level of counting, I did see a good argument. It wasn't really an argument for the zone. It was an argument for the zone at the time it came out because all these tools weren't available to us, right?
Right.
The internet was not easily accessible.
And that makes sense.
Yeah. It still is very low fat. I mean, let me give you an example. One of the very first athletes I started working with when we did Eat to Perform, it was the first three athletes was this guy, Elizabeth, and Danielle. And the he called me up and is like, hey, you know, do you think you can help me? And you know, he has a relationship with Matt Chan, and Matt Chan did the zone. You know, it's always kind of interesting when you start to talk to people about, you know, their approach to nutrition. And the one thing that I know a little bit about Matt Chan. Matt Chan's not doing the zone all the time, you know, and so you could, I guess, make an argument that if the majority of the time you're eating, you know, without restriction and occasionally bringing into the zone, then maybe that would make it more effective. But that's not what a lot of people do, right? What a lot of people do is they're kind of eating paleo, and often they don't really track it, so they're kind of doing an intuitive thing, and much of the time they're trying to lose fat, but then they find that, their body just adjusts to whatever calories they're eating, and they're really not losing fat. So at that point, they start doing the zone. So when this guy talked to me, he was actually about your size, and he was eating anywhere from 22 to 25 blocks, which is right at 2,200 to 2,500 calories,
Yeah.
and that was really small. He was only able to get in one workout a day, and that workout, he said for a long time it just sucked. So we moved his calories up to 4,500, and he was just at a state right there where he knew that he was not going to do very good at regionals in the state that he was currently in, so he was willing to buy into what I said. We took him to I remember his weight was 225. We took him to 4,500 calories. He was able to start doing 2-a-days really quickly because regionals, I think at that time, we only had like about a month to kind of work with him. And he dropped 15 pounds like faster than just about anybody I'd ever seen. And he was eating 2,000 calories more a day. His metabolism had just kind of gotten stuck. You know what I mean? And once we introduced more calories, more carbohydrates, and what was interesting about it was he kind of ate paleo. He didn't eat. I mean, that was the argument that some people were making in your threads, or the comments in your thread, is that the athletes don't eat paleo. They kind of mostly do eat paleo.
Yeah, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to like the Northeast region, that was one thing I forgot to mention in my article that I wrote about observations from the Northeast region. There are 5 food vendors. Every single one of them is paleo. Like, there's no French fries. You can't get a pack of M&Ms. There's no, Haagen-Dazs. I mean, it's just paleo. And
Really, that would be fun. I would love to have a bunch of vendors serving that type of food.
yeah, I mean, if you think of it from the perspective, I mean, let's throw paleo out of the question. Whether you agree or disagree, who cares? But from the perspective of 5 vendors selling whole foods,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think that that's a plus. I mean, and many of the athletes, I mean, it was just hilarious. You'd see an athlete just like killing it, right? And he's on the floor, and then 5 minutes later, he's in line at Paleo Power Meals to go. And you're like, wow, this is an interesting experience. The other thing I was going to say is that we had a ETP performer win the Northeast region. Actually, what was interesting, I mean, certainly I've never worked with Matt. I've never talked to Matt. But I was looking at his nutrition throughout the weekend. So Danielle won. She took first place in the Northeast region. And I work intimately with Danielle and have for the last year and a half. But Matt also, he was drinking Vitargo. He was making sure to get in a lot of liquids. One of the things that we really teach people for these events is to make sure to get liquid nutrition, because oftentimes these guys get nervous, and so it's very difficult for them to get whole foods down. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. Spencer and I were actually in a conversation with Danielle where she was having trouble getting some food, and so we were able to kind of give her some suggestions. Boom, on Thursday night, she got back her appetite. She was able to get in some good meals, and most of the weekend she was eating, mostly whole foods. But like I said, both her and Matt Frazier are from the same gym, and they both won their region, which is
That's awesome. Yeah.
which really says a lot for their coaching. And obviously, I hope that we've had some small influence. We've actually had some big influence. April, are you familiar with Christy Lunny, Lunny?
It sounds familiar.
Well, she knows you, and she's known you since the beginning. She qualified as a Masters competitor. So they had 3 men that made regionals. One won the region, one woman that won the region, and then they had a masters competitor that's top 20 in the world. Imagine that gym. I mean, there's just nothing but like wad killers in that gym. You know, I'd hate to be just like a regular person
Yeah, I know.
working out there. Um, so we're going to get on to some questions. If you guys have any questions, you know, start throwing them out. You know, we're getting started a little bit later. Um, April, you had 3 questions from one of the users, and some people follow up. Can you read those off to me, and then we can kind of run through them a bit?
Yeah, let me pull them up.
Yeah,
The
if I
first,
would pull them up, it would, you know,
yeah.
who
No, I
knows?
just pulled up in my email. The first question is from Vanessa, and it says her first question is on the ebook. I see a lot of examples on how to meal plan, eat when you train in the AM, but I train in the evening after work and was wondering what an example of how I should eat would look like. For example, when should I have my carbs? Then,
Um,
then she asks, these are all kind of simple questions. Then she
well,
asks,
can I just answer that question
yeah,
real quick? Because it's a really simple answer. Um, Basically, you want to have your carbohydrates from a Metflex perspective. Um, the best way to say this to people is this is the suggestion, okay? And then the basic idea is you want to find out what works for you, right? So the basic suggestion is that if you work out at 6 o'clock in the evening, I probably want you to have whole foods around 4 o'clock. You know, some people go, well, 4 o'clock's a little too close to my workout. Some people can eat, you know, up to 5 o'clock. Mostly I find whole foods around 2 o'clock or 2 hours before. And then if you're using like a drinkable carb, usually if you have a lot of fat to lose, we do tend to recommend eating mostly whole foods just because it's more satiating. And so you end up actually it ends up being food. You know, sort of like what we talked about with these athletes with the drinkable nutrition. One of the reasons why they can get away with drinkable nutrition is because their calorie point is much higher than most normal people. And for a lot of people that are trying to lose some fat, need a little bit of a caloric deficit, the whole foods actually ends up being a plus for them. Um, that said, some adjustments that you can make is if, for instance, you're not feeling great, maybe your carbs were kind of low-ish the day before and it kind of dragged on you, or maybe the workout was, say, 45 minutes and that kind of, like Murph recently as an example, a lot of us did Murph. Um, you know, it's sort of hard to imagine how Murph is going to pull on you, right? And so you've eaten relatively normal, kind of standard Metflex, but then you start to realize that there's kind of a drag on you. At that point, I would probably recommend having some carbohydrates with your lunch rather than just pre-workout. But, you know, all of these are really guidelines. They're not rules. And in general, what we're trying to do is get, like, people tend to focus on the timing part, and the timing part is really about available energy. It's not about whether or not, um, you know, it's somehow magic, because it's certainly not magic. You know, one of the things that we came up with early on is quantity of food, because quantity, if you're trying for a deficit, obviously you need to be lower than your body would normally pull off of. Then it comes into quality of food, so mostly whole foods. And then the next one is variety, so you get a good variety of micronutrients in your meals. And then timing, which is interesting because people look at Metflex as a nutrient timing book when really the focus is more available energy at the right times. It's more important, as an example, to eat. The way that we like to say it is the maximum of effect for the smallest amount of draw from your body. So if you can get good results going at a deficit of, say, 300 calories, you know, A lot of people tend to want to go 1,200 calories, and what we would say is you're better off being a little bit more patient for a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is that you'll preserve your lean mass a little bit better doing it that way. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next question?
No, I think, getting some carbohydrates about 2 hours, before working. So if she's working out at 6, getting them at 4 is probably a good idea. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think the thing that always kills me is I can't remember. I was involved in a discussion with um, some really smart people, and everybody always wants to talk about nutrient timing as this thing, being in the anabolic window and all this other type of stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff has sort of been proven to not be that big of a deal. That as long as you get adequate protein, adequate carbohydrates, that the argument is good. Then a lot of people reverse it and they say, well, some people say that you don't need any carbohydrates pre-workout,
Right.
and you could make an argument for that. The question being, though, isn't that saying that there's some value in nutrient timing, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that saying that you shouldn't have pre-workout? See, if you don't have carbohydrate, let's say, for instance, you don't eat carbohydrates for 24 hours, then you work out, okay? You're using your workout as a fat-burning opportunity. I'm not saying that you should never do that, but I would say that most of the time you shouldn't do it. And the reason why I would say that is because the point of exercise is to get better at exercise.
Right.
And if you can walk into that exercise feeling closer to 100%, I have to tell you, I've done it many different ways. I've done it fully fasted. I never, ever could get to 6 o'clock, as an example, without having some food. I did try to do it with fat for a while there, but nothing ever came close to being as good as carbohydrates. So if you knew, as an example, that you were going to have, let's say, 250 to 300 grams of carbohydrate in a day, reserving 30 to 40 grams, pre-workout, if that makes you feel better, there's just no reason why you shouldn't do it that way. And I think for a lot of people, especially a lot of people that are going into their glycolytic reserves, they do find that having available glucose is of value. But also, as you get into some of these WODs and some of these strength training sessions that go a little bit longer, that replenishment of energy goes a lot faster because it takes a lot longer for your body to break down fat than it does to break down the glucose. So, question number 2, April.
Second question is, I'm also having a hard time establishing how I should calculate the grams, ounces of the food. Should I be using a food scale?
I love my food scale. I have to say, it's really one of these things where people get overly concerned about counting calories, and they get overly concerned about, getting into this regimented lifestyle. The fact of the matter is that if you're not really trying to diet, as an example, and one of the suggestions that we make to people is that they shouldn't be dieting all the time, more often than not, you'll have a good feeling for, what adequate protein is like. But if you're trying to get a specific result, why wouldn't you use a food scale? Why wouldn't you want to have some idea? I would think that the good majority of people have no idea what 6 ounces of lean chicken, how much protein's in that. There's just no reason why you shouldn't know that, right? I mean, we know that Kanye West and Kim Kardashian got married, over the weekend. Yet we don't know how much protein we're eating on a daily basis. Something's messed up about that. you know what I
Well,
mean?
I tell you what, I try to do the palm size, serving and all this type of stuff,
Yeah.
but until I got a food scale, I didn't realize I was actually eating too much protein. Because I'd have a strip from Costco, and it was like so many come in a pack, but it was a pretty big strip, and I was like, nah, there's a couple servings. It was probably like literally three and a half servings in one sitting, which is, for me it doesn't matter, but like I could have been eating more carbohydrates or something like that. So
And also for someone that's trying to drop body fat, focusing solely on that, that does matter.
yeah,
Especially like the nut butters and
yeah, those are huge. I mean, when I slather on some almond butter, peanut butter, I realize now that I was having probably two or three servings. Now, if I, put it on the scale,
Right.
tear it out, zero it out, then take some and put it on the banana. Now I see, okay, I only had a half a serving, and I spread it, evenly and a little bit thin as opposed to just slabbing it on there.
well,
And we're
that
Um,
not, just to be very clear, we're not making a case that you would always do that, right?
to
But
get an idea
to
of
get
what.
some clue, I'll give a great example. Um, you know, even since April has been here, because for a long time I did these webinars without any other people in it, and I think it just adds a lot more to the conversation. And then once April became the forum administrator, then it just made a ton of sense to have her here. But for the longest time, I never counted calories. Didn't really worry about it. I had some idea of how much I was eating. If it was a newer food, I would measure it out. But as an example, I sort of am kind of famous for my Friday night pizza, right? Because I have pizza every single Friday night. Well, I never ever counted the calories on that pizza, and the smallest size was 2,300 calories. And you go, well, if you don't know that, you know, that does kind of dig a little bit of a hole for you if you're trying to lose fat. And so once I knew that, it's not that I don't eat pizza now. I just eat a couple slices instead of 4 to 5 slices. And then I have more salad. But just being that little bit more conscious. Actually, one of the things that I do is they have an appetizer with meatballs, and so I get the meatballs, so I get my protein macros in, but it also fills me up. And so just eating a couple pizza, because a big part of Eat to Perform, I mean, talking to people at the Northeast region, talking to people live is really, and actually April got the opportunity. She did a seminar, a live seminar in North Carolina last week. And when you are able to meet with people in real life, okay, they're often not trying to win the CrossFit Games. They're often, not trying to be, 4% body fat. They just want to know how they can have a beer occasionally and kind of keep some fat off. And these are definitely some things that I think are kind of insightful. And so I think that's the argument for having a food scale. I think that's the argument for counting occasionally, and trying to solve the puzzle. That's what we're all in this for. We're all in this to solve the lifelong puzzle. And the biggest piece of the puzzle that I think we're contributing to the conversation that I just don't hear enough people saying is that the dieting is the problem. It's that people are constantly on a diet, especially females. Not saying that this doesn't affect males too, but the majority of people that we're talking to that experience these problems tend to be women. They tend to be more aggressive. And a lot of times, it really turns into a math problem. When you look at somebody like Spencer, or even in my case, men typically have more muscle than women, and so the math tends to work out in their favor. And so, like as an example, let's say that you were a female, you weren't counting calories, you had that pizza, right? Now all of a sudden the math is really working against you. Uh, what are your thoughts on that? And then April, what were your experiences doing your live seminar?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, sometimes these women, they're chronically dieting, and then they binge on something, and it just completely negates and ruins the rest of the week or 2 weeks. And so, like you said, for a guy, luckily we're able to eat more calories consistently, whereas the females they can't as much, and that unfortunately, um,
But
and then
that's
it
also the argument, by the way. That's also the argument for making muscle building a bit of more of a priority
right,
and not dieting so
yeah,
much as a.
yeah, because then you won't have an engine to burn it. So that's that is exactly what you're saying.
Is it to me now?
Yeah, I
The
think Paul's paused. Something happened with him. Oh well, you can go ahead.
I was going to say, he looks kind of froze. Like he's just sitting there. I think he had asked in regards to the seminar that I did,
Yeah,
that I went to the CrossFit box, and it was cool. It was just a lot of people who, like what he said, there was a couple of people who said that they would like to compete in a CrossFit competition at some point, but they never had. And, basically it's just people that just want to look like they work out and get better at their workouts and, hit a 200-pound deadlift and, and so forth and so on. It looks like we lost Paul.
oh no.
But the funny thing was, I talked to a lot of people, and, none were really very strict paleo. We had a couple that, it ended up having about 30, 40 people there, which it was a very large turnout for just me. But a couple people that ate, semi-paleo and, did 3-4 workouts a day. And, I asked them, we had discussed in regards to measuring and tracking food. And, and I basically told them, I said, if you're getting progress, if you're seeing progress in your workouts or the bomb, you don't have to track anything, but
Mhm.
obviously if you're not getting the body composition progress or your workouts aren't, to their full potential, then maybe you need to troubleshoot what the problem is,
Right.
and there's no reason in tracking and eating more food if you're already doing great,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah. Right.
but,
Exactly.
there was this one guy in particular who he did 3-4 workouts a day, and I asked him, I said, well, what do you typically eat? He basically said he ate all whole foods, no supplements, no, processed anything, which is great. But I asked him, I said, well, how much do you eat? He said, well, I eat a lot. And I said, well, tell me how much you eat. I said, I guarantee you, I want you to write down on a sheet of paper and tell me how much you eat, and you probably barely hit 2,500 calories a day. And typically it was, okay, I'll do a workout and then, I'll eat a banana. And
Yeah.
then I'll, and eat this and eat that. And I told him, I said, you do not eat as much as you think you do. I said,
Exactly.
just bottom line, you don't.
Yeah. If
Um,
you're eating those whole foods, it's tough when you're eating whole foods. That's why it's a good way to lose fat.
exactly. That's why paleo works for some people, for especially overweight people, initially, and then after the first 6 months, it's kind of, you plateau, I'm
Hmm.
not seeing progress anymore, that type of thing. Back to the tracking thing, the comment that I wanted to add while Paul was talking about his weekly pizza, is I see a lot of people that you diet throughout the week, and if you don't track and you have your weekend cheats,
Yeah.
2 days of cheating can totally
It just
derail your
wipes
deficit
it
for the
out.
week. Exactly. And, and I tell them you're just basically spinning your wheels, whereas, if you're going to do that, or if you're going to add alcohol in, you need to strategically do it, not, just make it a free-for-all, on
Yeah.
Friday, Saturday. So,
Exactly.
yeah, I personally don't want to, torment myself being on a diet Monday through Thursday or Sunday through Thursday, and then, have my fun on Friday and Saturday, and then go through the torture again and just not seeing any results.
Yeah. Yeah. Did, since Paul's gone, does that mean the whole thing is gone?
I don't know. It's actually still live.
Does that mean are people watching via
Yeah, there's still people watching, I think. I don't know what happened to them there.
because
Um, Here, you can answer this question. Her third question, Vanessa's third question was, what are your thoughts on a pre-workout drink that involves creatine and BCAAs?
Yeah, if the research behind BCAAs is okay if you're not getting sufficient total daily protein, but if you're getting enough total daily protein, it's not nearly like from good sources that have a lot of BCAAs in them, um, which would be around a gram per pound of lean body mass or body mass. Um, so if you're not getting a lot of protein, if you're not getting enough protein, BCAAs and creatine before a workout and after, during and after a workout aren't bad. I don't know if that's what you do. I only do that in the morning, honestly, when I haven't eaten anything and I have to take medicine that can't be taken with any calcium, which is like if I take a protein shake, they generally all have calcium in them. So I do sometimes do the BCAAs, but that's about it.
Whenever I used to practice intermittent fasting, I did the BCAAs only when I was doing fasted
Yeah,
workouts.
exactly.
Yeah, pretty much I always eat beforehand now, and I don't, there's really no point. I've actually got a couple of tubs of that stuff that, I have no use for whatsoever. So, and I think that there is the research. I know that there's been the studies based on the creatine. It's, most optimal to take it post workout.
Yeah, it honestly just
That's what I
you
started saying. Me personally, I feel like once your muscles are fully saturated and loaded, it doesn't